Come on along, grab your friends. Jake the dog and Finn the human. Here we are in adventure time. Quack, quack. I think the quack, quack goes first. But how do I turn this around? Oh my God. All right, my spiritual babies. We are back again. Episode, what episode are we on now? 10C part 1. Well, I know we're doing meatheadism. Yes, modern meatheadism, which is looking for the strains of meatheadism in modernism. What's wrong with the current days? And we're using, this is the one, National Socialist versus Christian Nationalist. Which is which? Which is America? Where are we today? And we're doing part 1 because there's so much on this. We're probably going to have to do part 2 depending on how long this goes, because, oh my God, it did take forever to figure out. But we're going to start. Let's start with our mandatory tubing check, meaning I have my pants on, which I don't know if you can see. And our mandatory prayer for the day, so that we can say our favorite prayer, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, as it is Good Friday. God of Rock, thank you for this chance to kick intellectual ass. We are your humble servants. Please give us the power to blow people's minds with our high voltage rock and reason. In your name we pray. All right, and so we're doing our little prayer today from, of course, Dewey Finn from the School of Rock, aka Jack Black. Thank you. That was the best prayer ever. Okay, we're doing, oh boy, kids. Oh boy. My spiritual babies. All right. I mean, this is just ridiculous. If you look at my notes on this, it's freaking insane. And I hope I don't miss anything. But we are trying to make Isaac Asimov's psychohistory a actual thing. Still haven't read the book again. It was 40 years ago. I might read the book and find out that, that I've completely cracked. This is a complete waste of time. But I don't think so. But, I'm pretty sure to remember that there is something to this idea of psychohistory. Go juice. I hope I can figure out like a way to buy me a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. But for now, we're going to have to go with that. So where are we going to start today? We're doing National Socialism versus Christian Nationalists, because everybody, they like to call us the white Christian nationalists. People that are trying to to make America a Christian nation again, as if it ever was, as if it was ever a time that it wasn't a Christian nation, even today. And so what they do is they call you anyone who's trying to reset order and try and make America Christian again. They call you a white national Christian national. It's like somehow that's a bad thing. And we're going to get into that, breaking down the Christian and the nationalism. But of course, what this is really is you bunch of cultural Marxists, a bunch of National Socialists, and they hate being called that, but that's where they are. We're going to do some of the history on that today, versus the Christian Nationalists. That's what's really going on. That's two strains of modernism in America today that we're trying to break apart, and that's what we're doing in this whole attempt at modern meatheadism, trying to break apart what is modernism, postmodernism, and the end of the age we are at right now, and so we can get an idea about where we're going to go in the future. So my spiritual babies, we got to do a little theory first, unfortunately. There is a thing called, and the first part of this is the theory of, we have to do it because we have to try and see where we are with the idea of naturalism versus theism. And the part of the problem that we are today is you have the theolizing, the quote secularization. One of these days I'm going to do one on that, of society and culture, and that's why all the guardrails are coming off and it's falling apart right now. But the authority of the people doing this, they say, it's reasonable. It has to be done. This is reason. This is how we get progress. Is by demythicizing culture and getting God out of all the sciences and politics and philosophy. And oh, look, you can do this. And pretty much what we've now determined is that the last 400 years that they've done that has only ended up into one crap storm after another crap storm as people try to find a way to do it. And as G.K. Chesterton said, the problem with not believing isn't not believing. It's that if you don't believe, and he meant Catholicism, if you don't believe, or at least in Christianity, then it's not that you don't believe in anything, it's you believe in anything. And that's part of the problem today. People will believe in anything, and they replace a belief in God with a belief in Gaia and the environmental world, global change, the Democratic Party, you name it, communism, you name it, socialism, National Socialism, you name it, and they replace the belief of God. So again, it's not like you can separate out a belief. Baldini's rule is everything is theology. In the end, everything is theology because everything's based on axioms. So anyway, to getting to the axioms. So the Eurothea dilemma. So basically, Socrates or Plato or both or one of them or both of them or Plato writing for Socrates one day asked a question to Euthyphro, who was a priest, and he said, "Is pious loved by God because it is pious, or is pious loved by God because he's God?" Right? And so the question is in this dilemma is basically it boils down to this: is why add another mystery to a mystery? Is God good, or is the reason why we love things that God does, paying, taking care of the poor, taking care of the widows, taking care of the orphans, is that naturally good in itself? And if it's instinctive, if it has its own natural goodness to itself, then that's a mystery, and we don't need to add another mystery to it by saying, "Oh yeah, God created that." This is actually a fallacy, in theology that's been handled recently by many people, and basically it says, well, that's a false dichotomy, and you can actually have the case, which is what we believe, that godness equals goodness, therefore the same thing. So you're not adding on a mystery. The problem with you have is if you don't say that, is where do you get your quote natural goodness? Where do you get this instinctive natural goodness? Where does this come from? Because as Steven Pinker, and we're going to have to do a lot of quotes, would say from his book, the scientific outlook has taught us that some part of our subjective experience are products of our biological makeup and have no objective counterpart in the world. The tastefulness of fruit, the foulness of carrion, the scariness of height, and the prettiness of flowers are features of our common nervous system. And if our species had evolved in a different ecosystem, or if we were missing a few genes, then our reactions could be or would be the other way. If the distinction between right and wrong is also a function of brain wiring, why should we believe it any more real? And it is just as a collection of hallucinations. How could we argue that evils like genocide and slavery are wrong for everyone rather than just distasteful to us because of our biology? So basically, he's making a point that the problem with a moral order, with morality itself, my point being that all Darwin did was replace Christian morality, the meek shall inherit the earth with the strong shall inherit the earth, and back to the old animalism, And that's his point. Is if we've learned now that we basically have these biological tastes. We like the taste of fruit and food. We dislike the taste of carrion on the side of the road, because if we get it, we'll get the germs, and we'll more likely die. So it's evolutionarily been bred into us that we find that distasteful. Interestingly enough, the Old Testament prohibitions against shell food and pigs were scavenger animals, and kind of makes sense, because scavenger animals are more likely to pick up diseases, and if you eat them, you're more likely to get diseases. So again, the Bible seems to be right. The Old Testament seems to be right about something for the time, but now with modern processes, you can remove all those diseases, and you can actually eat pigs, which is, I could never give up because I love bacon. But his point being is, well, this is just evolutionary biology. Then back to Socrates and Plato. Then how do you say goodness is anything other than a taste, a arbitrary, random selection you cannot trust, and you can't trust. We're all in some giant hallucination. It's all biological. That's the problem with science and biology. Is in the end, if you base it on the biology, you get what we would call evil of deciding that murder is good, and rape is good, and all the rest of it. So that brings up another question. If a psychologist, if you look at Jordan Peterson, he'll make a statement like this again and again and again. Oh, look, I'm not doing that. I'm using this scientific body of knowledge called psychology, right? Here we're at psychohistory. Well, the problem with that, though, is from their perspective, from the animalistic perspective of their version of science, which is Darwinian science, and everything is random, none of that makes sense, because there is no such thing as psychology in nature. You could say animals have a certain psychology only because we have a certain psychology. And where does our psychology come from? It comes from our mind. So what is the mind? Well, the mathematicians, not mathematicians, it is now making the general rounds, the idea that there's a problem with scientists disavowing theology due to a huge problem of where does the math come. So it's now making the rounds. I'd argue this for like 30 years, but nobody listens to me. But one of my observations of my father and his group of research ballistic physicists was that they were all really big believers. Part of it's probably because there's a truism. There are no atheists in foxholes. On the other side of that, in the Utopia and the Ivory Tower, they are all atheists. The reason for that is the great Thomas Sowell, the greatest economist of all time, will tell you, because the in the foxhole and with the physicist and the engineer, at least with the engineer and the weapons designers and the research ballistic physicists, is they have consequential knowledge, meaning that there's a consequence to their knowledge. As he describes it, he was coming in on a flight to Syracuse one time, and the radio tower radioed to the pilot, says, "Hey, your wheels aren't down," and immediately the pilot pulled up on the plane, and they went up, and he goes, "Now, that's consequential knowledge. Thank God all those people know what they're doing, and they have knowledge that actual physical things, as opposed to the Ivory Tower and the Utopia, where their products are ideas which have they have a long-term consequence, but they have no immediate consequence. So there's no so it's not like when you're in a foxhole. If you believe in dumb crap and you just, I can lift my head up and just wander around the fields, well, you're not gonna live that long. There's gonna be a big consequence to that. You're gonna get blown up, Whereas with the ideas, you can, in the academy, you can spout off any kind of nonsense like Marxism or cultural Marxism and all, and still collect your big fat salary from stealing the future of these kids, still collect for your pension, and live a great life with no consequence. So it's consequential knowledge versus inconsequential knowledge. Now, about that knowledge, though, there is a question. Mathematicians. So my observation about those mathematicians is that they use they needed their faith and belief, and because it allowed them to take advances in the sciences, and so it's making the rounds now that for this problem. So 2 + 2 = 4. I have that thought in my mind. If I said that, you have it, and we're not talking about the communists who think that 2 + 2 = 5, but just say in where we are right now, and we're talking. I know that 2 + 2 = 4. You know that's 2 + 2 = 4. Well, would 2 + 2 = 4 still exist if all human beings were dead? And the answer to that is yes. Now, you can't say the same thing about physics, right? Because say the current theory of theory is that the physics began with the Big Bang, and so maybe if the universe goes back again to a big singularity, physics won't exist, just like maybe it didn't exist beforehand. But the math did exist. Well, say every human being is dead, and all the civilization is dead, and the entire universe is back into the singularity or whatever. Does that thought 2 + 2 = 4 with no human beings around, is that true? Does it exist? And the answer is yes, it does exist, because that reason is truth, and that's in the mind of God, outside the universe, beyond the universe. And that is one of the reasons why you need a God. You can even break it down to axioms of math, and say there are certain axioms of math, axiom of geometry. Between 2 points you can draw a straight line, blah 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 blah, and all the rest of it gives you geometry. Nobody can prove each of the axioms. That's why they're axioms. So they would be a whim, except that there's a larger truth that makes them operate. There's axioms of order behind that. Well, number one, that we always believe in that axioms, we can build mathematical systems on that, geometry. For if you're doing math, regular math, it would be the axioms of order. We do everything from left to right. And then first we do parentheses, then we do the exponents, then we do multiplication, division, then we do addition and subtraction. But even then, which do we do first, addition or subtraction, multiplication or division? Well, because of the order, the axiom of order, we do the first one we see first, because we're moving left from right. But that hierarchy of orders is that math is based on. You can never prove, and you need it to exist to do it right. If you don't do it, you won't get the right answer. And that right answer, the truth, is the mind of God, is beyond our universe now. And so one of the arguments now for the existence of God is you're going to see emerging is math works, and it should work. Now, this is my take on this from 30 years ago. I can give you Baldini's rule on mathematics. So the only thing useful you can get from this probably is this. I figured it out mathematically. I noticed there was a pattern that if you make $1 an hour at the end of the year, it roughly translates to $2,000. So, because I was trying to figure out how much it was to get a raise from $10 an hour to $11 an hour. So if you make $10 an hour, that translates to $20,000 at the end of the year. If you're making $20,000 a year, that roughly translates to $10 an hour. Every dollar is another $2. So $11 is $22,000, right? $11 an hour is $22,000. $20 is $40,000. If you're making $100,000, that's equivalent to $50 an hour. All right. Now, there is zero reason why that should work. It is completely arbitrary and whim, right? It's only because we have a 40-hour work week that works, and there's roughly 52 weeks a week that we're doing it. And we do everything by the year instead of some other system, right? There's no way in hell that should work mathematically. If we were just inventing things for us, we would invent that and nothing else. But even if since everything is so arbitrary underneath it, the fact that math works at all, my point being, shouldn't be. That math should not work because it's completely arbitrary. It's completely whimsical. And yet it does. Every dollar translates to $2,000 at the end of the year, because there's a truth to that. That even when you're making up stuff like that, the higher truth, the higher order of truth that's in God's mind, the good, the true, exists. So, where are we with our psychohistory? All right, psychohistory. So, remember that's the question. So, can you extract out that higher order and those higher axioms and still have a functional body of knowledge, either in math, science, or psychology, or philosophy, or politics, or anything? Can you extract out that higher order and axioms of God and still have a functional body of knowledge? And the answer is no. But we're going to get to that, and that's part of what we're learning with psychohistory, because now we're trying to make psychohistory a thing, and it really isn't a thing. I'm trying to make it a thing, and part of the psychohistory, so we've been battling with this idea, because Eleanor Roosevelt made the quote that great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. And basically what we're doing is discussing people and trying to say that from the people we get ideas. And the great Greek Aristotle has a counter quote to that going, men start revolutionary change for reasons connected to their private lives. And the whole point of psychohistory is to use the body of knowledge that we learn about science to get to a deeper truth in history, that a lot of these idiot ideas have come up because of psychological developmental problems in the raising of the people who come up with the idea, and psychological unfoundness and psychological pathogens, pathologies, rather than a proper growth where if they looked at themselves and they had a good therapist, but that's not going to help. What you need is a good priest to tell you what you're doing right and wrong. You wouldn't have had these problems, and you wouldn't come up with this stupid crap that you're now trying to get all the rest of us to follow with it. And what happens is that some people, also broken, also with psychological problems, go along with this, and the next thing you know, it's somehow in the culture, and the next thing you know, there's all kinds of people doing it. So that's our attempt with psychohistory. That's our philosophy for today. And so we're going to start then. We have to break this down, of this idea of National Socialism versus Christian nation. So we're going to have to break down the growth of the idea of first socialism, then the idea of development of nations, and then what I'm going to make the argument that that's all European, and then you're going to get the idea of Christian nationalism, which is strictly a New World American, meaning North and South idea, and separate from National Socialist. Okay, starting with that, we're going to start with the philosophy that I'm blaming, the philosophers I'm blaming first. So for a quick recap, Boyle is a great priest in like 1400, and St. Thomas Aquinas both came to same ideas at the same time, basically. St. Thomas Aquinas says, looking at the great Greek Aristotle, says, yes, there's a cause, it's cause and effect, but that means that there is that cause was the effect of another cause, which was the effect of another cause, all the way back to the first mover. And so he created a logical framework for Western society and the world that we live in, from the first mover, from every cause and effect. This created a philosophical framework for Newton later to come up with the rules of physics and math, calculus, to create a mathematical and physical framework of mechanisms, the way he done so philosophically. You had Boyle around the same time as St. Thomas Aquinas. He said, we got to take the myth out of things, and we have to try and find the mind of God in the mind of the laws of nature. At the same time, St. Thomas Aquinas. This gives us the mechanized world of nature, where all the early scientists and all the real scientists actually done any work are trying to figure out the mind of God by reading the book of nature. So first you read the Bible, so you learn the mind of God. Then you read nature and the book of nature to find the mind of God. So In the philosophical world, although there was lots of people, I'm going to blame Hegel, tried to divorce philosophy from uh, from any belief in God, from the axioms of God, from the axioms of order. So Hegel wanted to help bring philosophy closer to a form of science where it can lay aside the title of love of knowledge and be actual knowledge. That is why I lay before me. So it's this idea that you can have actual knowledge without a belief in orders. So you can have 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 without the axioms underlying that. I just explained the axioms of order. And you can't do it. You can't do it for philosophy. You can't do it for psychology. You can't do it for physics. You can't do it for math. You can't do it for philosophy because then you're seeing what the problems we have today. So Hegel, you have Hegel. Then you have the development of rights. So the development of rights was the same thing. And you really got to Carl Benjamin does a great job of this. Sagan, he really lays it out really well. I'm just going to briefly theorize. This is, but everybody's taught this in college. But this is the basic. Carl Benjamin's great addition to it was that you get this development of liberalism and rights throughout the 1600s that winds up into communism, and his point is that this is why communism is the inevitable and logical conclusion of liberalism, as communism will always dog liberalism to a degree. But that's because the early thinkers wanted to divorce rights from the king and the monarchy, because you had 1600, you had that wacko maniac James I / James VI. This is the one who gave us the King James version of the Bible, because he didn't like a footnote in the Geneva Bible. Anyway, he was a maniac authoritarian who wrote a book. His only one book was on the complete absolute authority of kings, and he says that the kings have inherited apostolic from the apostles themselves their authority. So and this of course is the because of the Protestant / Catholic wars that were going on. The king. In England, after Henry VIII declares he wants to be pope because he wants to have sex with the new wife, and so you get this back and forth through the next couple hundred years of the King of England, who's the pope now, changing whether he's Catholic or Protestant, and then when he gets in power, they get in power, or she gets in power. If they're Catholic, then they kill all the Protestants. If they're Protestant, they kill all the Catholics, and you get this development of a need to get rights away from the religious world. And so you get Locke, you get Hume, you get Locke, you get Rousseau, and the idea of natural rights develop. And the idea of a natural right with a really off sport that goes over to America that I'll get to in a second. But the idea of natural rights is that at one time there was this mystical, magical, mythical time where the state of nature existed, where everybody had these natural rights, and then you had all these rights, and you didn't have governments kind of take them away or give them away or impose them on you. Now, this is always a fiction, of course. Nobody knows. It's imaginary history, which we love because we're doing it right now, but it's really ungrounded imaginary history because nobody knows. Nobody go back in the time. We don't know if the Cro-Magnon man were a bunch of hippies, eating mushrooms and toking away and enjoying. Hey man, you do you, or they were brutally like a tiger. Early man just beats somebody over the head. Any male he sees, he beats over the head, and just so he can have his make a circuit of all the women he can have the marital relations with before he had marriage in a circle. Nobody knows. If you look at chimpanzees, they say we're like chimpanzees, but which ones are we like? Chimpanzees or we're like bonos? That's the problem with natural selection and ethics is there is no such thing other than the strong shall survive. Anyway, and the meek shall not inherit the earth. Anyway, natural rights morph into this idea of, okay, of John Locke's idea that, okay, you have these natural rights, and you give them to, you delegate some of them to the state so you can take them back when they're not being done, we're not being protected. To Rousseau, who says, oh no, you delegate all your rights to the state, and the state has all their rights. You have no rights. We call them civil rights, other than what the state gives you. And then from that, you get later on the development of communism, because communism says, well, wait a minute, you say you have these rights, and all you have these civil rights, whether you call them or not, but you're not getting equality for these civil rights. Now that actually happened in Europe. In that now of course the sport was, while this was all going on, the sport, meaning the type of rose or orchid, if you were, that mutates out of that, which jumps the channel to America, which is the idea of natural rights in America, to get rid of the King George III, by securing the natural rights, so-called natural rights of mankind, even though they don't exist, of the founding fathers, but secured not on the King, but in the Declaration, which was a legal document. I mean, idiots go around saying, oh, the Declaration of Independence isn't a legal document. Bullshit. It is completely a legal document. It was voted on by the 13 colonies, approved by the representatives of the people of the 13 colonies, and Philadelphia. It was signed, and it was served on the King. So the King had notice, and it severed all legal ties. It is as much a legal document as anything. It is the founding legal document of America. So anyway, in that document, it says, our rights are not granted by a state. Our rights are not from nature. Our rights are given to us by our Heavenly Father. And each one of us have it. And so we are endowed by these rights with certain, we're endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. So these are rights that cannot be taken us. These are not Rousseau rights that are civil rights, right? These are inalienable rights, meaning they can never be separated from us. And they are granted to us by God the Creator, right? So all politics has to be based on this. That's why America has to be Christian natured, because if you can't make that statement, then you have no rights, right? And then anybody can take them away from you. The state can take them away from you. This is the thing that separates us from Europe. But that's the sport, and I'll get to it in a bit, because we're still back in Europe. Now, when you had the development of the idea of rights, and the morphing of that into states' civil rights that only the state has the power of, you had a couple things. You had the king being knocked off and replaced by big aristocracy and the parliament, things like that, which was good. But you also had the horrors of the Dixonian times, and this is what the labor movements were doing. So you had we look at back and we go, oh, the evil power of the bourgeois, oh, evil power of people. That's kind of nonsense. It's the narcissistic age that we have that says that our age is so much better than their time. What it was a time of transition, and people had to figure out what's going on. You went from living on the farm to now living in cities and with industry. And so there were in the Dixonian times you had kids that were working in factories losing hands because they got the little hands. I mean, if I had the factory, I would do the same thing, right? I mean, I got 9 kids. If I was working, back in that time and I had a factory, I said, well, of course I'm going to have my kids work in the factory, just like I would have them learn the most important rules of life by working on the farm. Getting up, taking care of the cows, feeding, make sure they're milked, making sure they're the chickens are taken care of, so they learn how to work, right? Of course I'm going to have them in the factory. Plus, they got those tiny little hands, so they can stick them in the machines and fix them. Right, Oompa Loompas. Everybody needs an Oompa Loompa, right? For the factory. So you put the little hands in there. Well, so they lose a hand. Well, that's why you have 2 hands, right? So there was definitely a transition period there. We had to figure out, oh, look, that's not good. That's probably self-defeating. Now you have child labor laws. Same thing with all the rest of the laws that they were developing at the time. So there was really, though, a time, though, if you look at it from 1790 to time about the found of the Revolution to in America, but from that time, the French Revolution to 1870 or 18 something like that, UK in England itself, the GDP doubled. So literally all boats got lifted. Yes, it was messy because it was a transition. But what is this beginning from that date and the beginning of industrialization? Although we can make a big argument that it really started over in America because the farm was the first place industrialized. But they're going to say in England because everybody in history books says that now. It's in England and it's textile factories and stuff. Just going with that. From that date, 1790 or so, or it might be 1780 or 70. I might have it wrong, but I think it's 1790. From that date, 95% of the world was starving and in poverty, pure poverty. Only 5% were lifted up. Till just this, like last few years ago in 2020, in 2020, which is our lifetime, it's completely reversed thanks to free markets. Now, as of 2020, literally 95% of the world has been lifted up out of poverty, and the we are talking 8 billion people here now, a lot more than back in 1790, and only 5% are still starving and in poverty. I mean, that's unbelievable. But it began at that period, and yes, there was a lot of transition, but it allowed that creep like Marx and the socialists to rise. Now, socialists began as a good intention because they were saying that they weren't getting the rights, but then it morphed into Marxism and communism, as I pointed out in earlier episode. Go look in the earlier episodes about that, about how his Marx himself was just a devil worshiper, just an anti-Semite, and if you replace his notion that the bourgeois were no good because they were hoarding everything, and they hoarding capital, and they spend it on themselves. Well, just replace that with Jew, and you understand his anti-Semitism and how his whole Marxism idea is just complete bullshit, which is complete warmed up, dressed up anti-Semitism, and has no economic validity at all, right? It's just warmed over anti-Semitism. But so you have the rise of socialism in Europe. It began as good movements to try and increase the ability of workers to get rights, but really it's actually Abraham Lincoln who has the best take on this. He says no man is entitled to the sweat of your work, right? And so if you look at it, though, look at a free market. Say they're doing the golf course over here with the greatest golfer of all time. I forget his name. He's just doing the golf course over. He took the public course over. I mean, I don't care. I don't play golf. But he took over the public course, and he's going to create this Tiger Woods. He's going to create this the greatest golf course ever over here in Delaware County, taken away from the people. If I go work there for $10 an hour, answering the in the parking lot, getting cars, right? What am I entitled to for my labor? Am I entitled to his labor? I'm not the one who figured out, is the best in golfing. I didn't figure out this course. I didn't get the capital and risked it all on this endeavor. If it goes belly up and everybody loses their shirt, what's it to me? Nothing. So I'm only entitled to labor of my sweat, to the sweat of my brow. So if I'm just standing there as doing the parking lot for taking keys for $10 an hour, that's all I have risked. That's all I have, the limited labor I have in it, just my time, and that's what I get. I get a fair exchange for that, depending on what the market is. Who am I to steal the sweat of his from his brow, no matter how rich he is? That's envy. That's evil. For all I know, God above has determined that this guy is going to go to hell, and this is the only good thing he's going to get in his entire universe, and so he might as well enjoy it now, because come that day, he's gone. Or it could be that this is in this life, he's the golf expert, and I'm, the guy working in the parking lot. But in the next universe, I'm the golf expert. That's never going to happen. never going to happen. And he's the guy working in the parking lot. And so maybe this is how you learn it. But it's up to him and not us. And what's up to us is to not be envious and to want to steal somebody else's labor and somebody else's stuff just because socialism tells us to do it or communism tells us to do it. So now I'm going. So that starts in the through Europe, and then we get to the greatest socialist of all time because he gets it. So tell me who this is. All right. This is all bombastic nonsense. It boils down to this, that you would give every party member the right to decide on the idea, even to decide whether their leader is true to the so-called idea or not. This is democracy at its worst, and there is no place for such a view. With us, the leader and the idea are one. This is called the Führer principle, by the way. One of the two distinguishing things about a certain guy with like a mustache. And every party member has to do what their leader orders. You are a soldier yourself. I ask you, are you prepared to submit to the discipline or not? Right? Then he goes on to go, I am not, because people don't believe this. People don't believe that the National Socialists were called National Socialists for a reason, right? This is why, because that's the in NAZI, the A, the S, the Z is socialism, right? And here he goes. I am a socialist, and a very different kind of socialist from your rich friend Count Ravenslow. I was once an ordinary working man. I would not allow my chauffeur to eat worse than I eat myself. I just laugh at that. He's such a megalomaniac maniac. He can't realize that, wait a minute, we both have chauffeurs. So aren't both of us idiots? Aren't both of us not working men? No, he doesn't figure that's never going to hit in there, right? And so then he goes on, and now you can tell exactly who it is, right? There are no revolutions except racial revolutions. There cannot be a political, economic, or social revolution always and only if the struggle of the lower stratum of inferior race against the dominant higher race, and if the higher race has forgotten the laws of existence, then it loses the day, right? And we all know who that is. Okay, here Hitler, a socialist, right? The socialist, the head socialist. And basically he was arguing, that was the argument he had. What happened was, this is with the Strasser brothers. There was two of these Strasser brothers who were running the propaganda wing of the papers. Much like we have propaganda wing. Right now, like the Democrat Party now is being run by propaganda outlets. Back then there was these two Strasser brothers who were running Nazi papers in two cities. I forget which two. One of them wanted to support one of them wanted to support a strike of a particular factory, and Hitler said no because he didn't play for what he was his attempt for power right then, and he says. And when the one Strasser brother said, well, wait, we're socialists, we should be fighting against the powers of the corporation, he goes, Hitler explains to him exactly what socialism is. And it is this. He goes on to say this, is, listen, if the company is doing what we tell it to, why would we interfere? It is then working, meaning it's working for the government telling us what it's supposed to do. The Nazi Party, which is socialism, right? That's the evil of what we're seeing today is the uniting. If there's anything worse than big business, it's big government, and the worst of all that is big business and big government together, right? Well, he's making a point to the socialists bully and tell what the businesses to do, and then they are an arm of the government, and that's socialism, right? And this is developed over there, and as you know, that's the National Socialist. Everything American. Oh, well, you have to do rise of the nation. All right, so that's the political that's the philosophical development, philosophical development. That's the political development. Now we have to get nations, the idea of nations. Where did the idea of nations come from? Well, psychologically, we have to do some psychology because we're doing psychohistory. You could say this is the Gestalt principle, where we see things with like, if they look alike, we think that they're alike, even if they're not related. So you can see two people with like the same color hair and think that they're related, but because they look alike and they're not, right? Or you could say it's the liking principle, which we are biased by. It's Cialdini's liking principle. He can't be a German. We only believe Germans in this philosophical crap, right? Anyway, the liking principle, which is you're biased to things that look like you. You can't say it's racism, though, because racism only comes around in 1859. So the development of nations is not a racial thing. Because remember, there is no racism in the readings, in early readings, okay? There is no racism at all. They don't have racism. Because to be the other, all you had to be was the next town over. So if you were a Roman, the Sabeans were your deadly enemy. And if you were Sabine, your deadly enemy were the Romans. And they look exactly alike. If you were a Florentine, then the Genoas were your absolute enemy. On that side, I think it's like that. I get that mixed up. Whatever. You get the principle. Well, just like then, so you had kingdoms. You had up out of feudalism, you had kingdoms rise. But then there was the Reformation, and then you had war, right? And really, beginning of nations, the French word, really began around with the Treaty of Westphalia around 1648. And in it, so you had 30 years of the religious wars. You had Protestants fighting Catholics. You had a big, European worldwide war. After 30 years of killing people for religious reasons, which was wrong, they had this breakdown. It's okay. You're okay. I'm okay. Treaty of Westphalia. So the Catholic German princess said to the Protestant German princess, okay, you be you, we be us, right? And same thing with France, and the other countries, Protestant England said France, you be you, we be you, we be us, right? And so peace reign out, but on these idea now that there are separate groups, right? Even though they all, all the princes, the German princes are the same, or look alike and stuff. So remember, you don't have racism because you haven't had Charles Darwin yet. You don't get that until you get it broken down into the scholarship of Kant and David Hume, who start associating physical characteristics with actual mental and behavioral characteristics. When you start having them line up, you have it in a scholarship, but you don't have it in the quote science. It hasn't made into the dogma of science. And so what you have is a rebuttable presumption of this, even at the best in the scholarship of, okay, as Thomas Jefferson, you can't call him a racist because he thought that you could say that he had it in the scholarship because he was well read, and he thought that the black races, he worried about the black races, but you can't call him a racist. They weren't going to be able to keep up with the other races because they weren't as smart. You can't call him a racist because he thought the Indian race, the red race, was smarter and physically stronger than the white race. So he saw the order like that. But when he was written a letter to by a black mathematician from Baltimore, he goes, I was wrong. Obviously, there are black people that are smarter than any white people, right? than many white people. But so it was rebuttal. It's only with Darwin, and you get the origin of the species, and most favorite races. You know who's the most favorite race, right? And then it goes over the channel to Germany, and next thing you know, it gets picked up by all the Germans, and next thing you know, the inferior race that guy was talking about, right? Were the Jews. And there's no difference between Darwin and Hitler. Darwin thought that the Irish were the lowest of the races, right? He was a racist pig, and he thought that the gorillas were the blacks were closer to gorillas than they were to whites, right? There's no difference between Darwin and Hitler, except that Hitler thought that the apex race was the Germans, and the Jews were like the Irish, and they were all the ones diluting the racial pool. But that's So you get the rise of nations along with that rise of the economics of socialism, and you get them combining into what people today call National Socialism, right? You know, Hitler. There are parallel developments. Now you have the idea that races are separate, that the German race and the German people are separate, and that they are then endowed with these certain spiritual, you know, the spirit of the Woke, right? Because this has become their new God. You know, they've removed God from theology and the axioms of God, and just like T.J. Chesterton has said, they were replaced with a new theology. As crazy, as wacko as evolution is, this becomes the new God, the new theology, and no matter what you do, everything is theology, just like Boldini says, right? Now you have National Socialism. All right, so that's National Socialism. But is that what's happening in America now? Well, it is a strain of this over here. I'll get to in a bit. But that's not America. That is the exact opposite of America. That's the exact opposite of what happened over here. We really need, listen, everything American is better. We need to look at England as what it is, a place where you get venereal disease and really dumb things, right? And we really say, listen, you know, basically the Bible came over here, got planted in the frontier, and we have a whole new thing, you know. And there's an article I'm going to do a whole new thing on the textualist and this guy. He's a Mormon. He's a Mormon theologist, and he's I don't know if I'm going to do. I don't even know if I'm going to do it, but it's these. You just shake his head. Oh, the Bible is it's rule of ethics. It's not a place to find morality, you know, bullshit, right? Listen to me now and believe me forever, kids. If there's one thing you get from this, is this: the Bible is literally the car manual of life. If you have a problem, go to the Bible. It is the manual. It's the instruction manual for life. It's the car mechanic manual for life, right? There's nothing new under the sun then, because it's the same shit over and over and over and over again. There's nothing new under the sun except of the life of Jesus Christ and the political expression of that, which is the United States of America. These fools keep saying how we're not a Christian nation. America is literally founded as a Christian nation. Yes, you know, Jamestown was 1607, but Plymouth Rock was 1620. From the very beginning, it was founded as a place to escape. Remember, we were talking about the Treaty of Westphalia and the 30-Year War. It was founded as a place to escape religious and thus political persecution in Europe. They came over here, and they always had a different idea. And literally, they dropped down into America, into the horror of the frontier, into the foxhole of life, real life, faced with real nature, ready to destroy you. Not the utopians that they'd already conquered and leveled out a lot of Europe to be, but in the any day, some new thing like a tornado, doesn't exist anywhere else, right, will pick you up and drop you off in Oz or kill you. And faced with that hell and that foxhole, you get America, right? Which is completely different. A Christian, now a full-on Christian-based society, because you're praying in that foxhole, please don't let the Indians who set the house on fire, please let them go away, God, please let this hurricane go by, please let this tornado go by, please let this flood go down. So all this 1600s, you know, and the colonization of America was a religious enterprise. Yes, there were some political enterprises to make money, but again, they quickly went like that to be religious, because they were faced with the same hell, the same frontier. Then you have the first Great Awakening and the second great big religious movements in America that create the revolution. Then you have a huge religious movement called abolitionism, which creates the Civil War and the end of slavery. Then you have World War II, and 12 million Americans go off, face death in the foxhole, and come back really religious. I mean, super religious, because they survived hell. They literally survived hell. And what happened is this. So one of the things we practice, we're gonna talk about is the market theory of religion. What we know from Europe is that, and the world, and the study of religions, is that America is the most religious society in the world, without a doubt. There's no society as religious as America. The second one down now is Brazil, right? And I get for a reason. So Europe is stratified into either two types of societies of Western Europe and Eastern Europe too. It's either the monopolistic, monopolistic. I just gave you the curse finger. Monopolistic southern states, like Italy, where the Catholic Church has a monopoly, or the state-sponsored, state-run, official state religion, like England, where the king is pope, and you have monopolies, right? Either work. This turns out to be a bad idea, because man enforcing man to do particular religion is slavery. God doesn't want slaves. He doesn't want robots. He wants volunteers, and they become the temple religion, and before you know it, they're just going through the motions, but nobody believes. It's same with the state religion, the state mandated religion, whether it's in England or Sweden, as it is with a monopoly, where the religion has a monopoly, as it is in in Spain and Italy. Interestingly enough, the moment you introduce some kind of competition, all of a sudden you get a totally different experience. So, for example, prior to World War II, the Latin America and South America were putatively Catholic, but nobody believed. They would produce maybe like 10 priests out of both continents, right, every year. World War II comes along. The American troops come back. A lot of them are Protestants. Decide what we're going to do is missionize. We're going to save the world by missionizing. They go down south, right? And all of a sudden, the Catholic Church down there has a huge problem, because Protestants believe. There are some Protestants who do nothing but wake up and worship Jesus Christ, who go out throughout the day worshiping Jesus Christ, who live, breathe, and will die Jesus Christ, right? They go down south in Latin America, they set up camp, and all of a sudden, people are believing in huge droves. Catholic Church is like, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? They do two things. One is charismatic Catholic Church movement. So they get real Catholics, back in the old style, founding fathers. I love to call them the founding fathers of the faith. The apostles running around, believing, like Paul. And you get the charismatic man. But the knuckleheads upstairs, downtown, we'll call it, the idiots downtown, the problem with the Catholic Church, the hierarchy goes, oh, I know what we need. We, just like in Europe, we need a communist version of this. Now, this is the dumbest ass idea. And we call it social justice. And it's warmed over communism. Look, we'll steal other people's stuff, and we'll call them out as hypocrites while we live in our big palaces with our big flat screen TVs, get fat, right? By stealing other people's stuff, by creating envy, by creating class envy, and by separating people instead of uniting them, like Jesus wanted. And with this social justice, will win the day. No, you will not, because social justice is flawed. At its end, it's a fake economic system that's just warmed over anti-Semitism, which again is just, and it's at its base, because Marx was a devil worshiper, is devil worshiping at its base, right? Because what it does is all of our successes and progress It looks to undermine. So instead of uniting us all as one people, e pluribus unum, it divides us, right? Now, economic socialism proved horribly wrong, but cultural socialism, aka cultural Marxism, aka Woke-ism, today is just as wrong. Just as it divides people in victim classes to put against each other, and create a social hierarchy of, oh look, you're the gay, black, trans, feminist. I don't even know if that's how you. Well, anyway, you get the idea that you get to to fight and express your evil white patriot, right? So somehow discriminating against white men is somehow justified, right? It's not. It's never is. Discrimination is never justified. Male discrimination against women is not justified any more than women's discrimination against men. Other than the discrimination that you do have for your prejudices, you like, oh, I like blue shirts versus red shirts, right? But anyway, so the Catholic Church creates this nonsense social justiceism, and the guy who's pretending to be Pope now, and because I'm going to make the legal argument that Benedict was Pope, right? They didn't have even though he says he retired, they didn't have a conclave since he died. So therefore, Francis is not the Pope until somebody has a conclave after Benedict died, not while Benedict was alive. But anyway, you see the social justice warriors today. Only they replaced economic. Now they're back to economics too. They're back to we have to steal from the rich to say we give to the poor. And the secret is they never do. They keep the money for themselves and their friends, right? They never give it to the poor. They never ever give it to the poor. They give a little bit and they keep it all for themselves, right? So now you have it's been jump the shark, jump the ocean, jump the Atlantic Ocean, National Socialism and social justice, which are the same thing in America today. And what's it fighting? It's fighting our traditional roots of Christian nationalism. Only it's not nationalism. Because, of course, America is not really a nation. We never were. From the very beginning. We have, you look at what's on the American money. What's on the American money? From the Francis Scott Key Bridge just went down. From Francis Scott Key, which is the Second War of Revolution, 1812, at the very end of it, you have "In God We Trust." On every dollar bill, you will see "In God We Trust." Older than that is liberty. On every penny it says liberty because you have freedom. Why? Well, because when America was in the foundation, William Penn came over here, set down the Quakers, the founding father. The Quakers were horribly discriminated against by the Puritans in England, who were pulling off their ears and striping their backs with whips and killing them. And the Puritans had to them. So even though the Puritans were to the north and and the less religious, but then Baptists and just as religious south from the Anglo-Saxons came in, that's a whole other thing. The Scots-Irish came in and went down there. The South became even more religious than the North. In the middle, in the Keystone State, in Penn's Wood, you had religious tolerance. That when Madison is creating the Bill of Rights, he goes, "That's the kind of religious tolerance we need. I'm going to model everything on Billy Penn and the Quaker way of doing things, which is we're not going to let the thing that everybody's been killing each other over for the last 100 plus years, religion, be the reason why we kill anybody else again." Now, it's not the case that there's a separation of church and state in America. That's a lie. Okay, it is. You cannot establish a top head federal government church. Each of the states can have their own state religion, state sponsored religion. And in fact, look at Maryland. What was Maryland, right? Maryland was Mary's state. Look at the Connecticut Congregationalist. That's the letter that Jefferson, who was not at the convention, sent back saying, listen, it's not going to be like that. We're not going to have a national religion. And the reason why is because they didn't want to have a case what they have in England, where they have the Anglican religion being the national religion and being able to suppress all the other religions. But all the states can do it. Why? Well, because the states had inherited sovereignty, quote sovereignty, from England, and so they were each sovereign in their own rights. Then they doled back like a little stick of power to the federal government, and the federal government originally, not today, had just these limited powers, and that's why if you go in federal court, you have to have some authorization, some justification. There has to be a federal power, a little tiny stick of federal power that only the federal government doesn't have sovereignty. It only has, even though they have the stupid dual sovereignty doctrine, which isn't a thing. Oh my God, gotta get rid of that word sovereign. But the federal government doesn't have sovereignty. It only has limited delegated powers. And to get in a federal court, you have to say it for the jurisdiction to get in there. And it's a limited areas. Although they destroyed the Commerce too, the Commerce Clause, by saying it means industry and agriculture and a lot of things it doesn't. It just meant high-end securities. But the way it's supposed to be is it's got a limited stick, and you have to have something to relate it to that limited stick to get in there. I have to go into the 14th Amendment and all that. But that's the difference between the federal government and the state governments. And if you look at it, then state means local. That's the genius of the founding fathers. So everything is local. And the federal government really just has to take care of post offices and the borders, and that's it. Nothing much more than that. But so you can have states like you have in Utah, where the governor was the CEO of the Mormons. He was governor, CEO of the Mormons, and the chief pope of the Mormons, whoever they call that with. And he was literally a theocracy. It was literally a theocracy. You can have that at the state level. You can't have it at the federal level. That's all that Jefferson meant. So it is not a actual argument you can make that America is not a Christian nation. It was always a Christian nation from the moment it was founded, because they were in the foxhole, even in Jamestown. But from each part of it, it was Christian, and the more it got into the frontier, the more Christian it went. I'm going to have to do we're going to have to do a part of the psychohistory is the history of history, which is historiography of history part, but we're not going to do it today because we're over an hour. And so you get the idea in America that it's always was colonized as a Christian Christian country, then developed into it. It was a place for everybody, because of course the oldest of all the ideas of America that make America America is, and it's also it's the third thing on the money. It's the oldest of all the symbols of America that makes the United States is, of course, that from the 1776, older than In God We Trust, older in Liberty, is E Pluribus Unum, from many one. So we don't need a United Nations, because from the very beginning, this was the place. It was a uniting of all nations. I live in Delaware County. In Delaware County, we used to have the bazaar of all nations. It was a great place. You go in there, they had an Army and Navy store. They had a record store. It was great. and Upper Darby's always been a bazaar of all nations. It's been a little bit bizarro too, right? It's Delaware County. Delco. Gotta love Delco. But America has always been this place. It has always been a place for everyone. And interestingly enough, the greatest argument I've ever heard for why you are a Catholic is when I asked my mother this way back when. In the height of the scandal of the child predator, of the priest preying on the children, the bad priest, the non-priest, the pedophiles that were pretending to be priests to prey on children, because that's, yes, Sutton Why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Why do pedophiles go, to Catholic Church? Because that's where the kids were, right? And where are the pedophiles today? Well, they're in the public schools, right? But nobody else has that problem with that. So, if Catholic priests had 1% pedophiles, the general public is 2.7. Lawyers and doctors, it's like 7%. And in the highest percent, 10%, it's the 10% of teachers are pedophiles, right? But nobody cares about that. But in the height of that and that horror, I asked my mother, smartest person I ever met, IQ out to wazoo, 165 plus. Read 12 books a week, 4 in history, 4 in educational psychology, 4 romance novels because she just loved the romance. Read every word, had 1% comprehension. I tested her, gave her a book on 3 hours on the Dutch resistance. Then I sat there. It took me 3 weeks to read. I read every word of it, and then I tested her on it. The only thing I could get her on was she didn't know it was on page 170. That's not fair, but 100% comprehension. Smartest person I ever asked. I asked this question. Put that in contrast, my little Italian illegal alien grandmother, Philomena, spelled with an F, had a 6th grade education, if that. Couldn't read or write English. Never went to school. Had the greatest wisdom of the mountains. I still say her sayings more than I say anybody's, right? But that's education. One education, the greatest education you could be, Chestnut Hill, University of Penn versus the least education person you can ask. That's why I tell you who these two people are so you understand the context. So I said to my mother one day, Mother, how can you be a Catholic? How can you do it? How can you stay a Catholic? She goes, that's easy. I go, easy? What? What do you mean easy? She goes, it's easy. It's easy to be Catholic. She goes, listen, the Catholic Church is the only one for everybody. Listen to this. The Catholic Church is, if you want to take it intellectually, you want to take your faith intellectually, and you want to bash your head against St. Thomas Aquinas, and you want to get deep into the woods and to what it means to be a Christian and stuff like that intellectually, go right ahead. There's a place for you. Or if you just want the simple faith of your grandmother, Philomena, then there's a place for you. It's the only church for everyone. That's what Catholicism means. It's universal. It's for everyone. Just like America. E pluribus unum. There is nothing new under the sun, my children. It's the same old crap, except the life of Jesus Christ and the political expression of that, United States of America. So today, on Good Friday's Day, my little spiritual babies, go to your knees. Thank God. Thank God for him dying for us. Thank God. First of all, apologize for all the sins you did today. Every day, apologize for all the sins, and then thank him. Thank him. Okay, my spiritual babies? Because in the end, e pluribus unum. Out of many, one. Okay, my spiritual babies? That's it for episode 10C, part 1. We'll talk about who the worst is, the National Socialist or the Christian Nationalist, maybe next time. Or I'll just go on because I've had it. I gotta get this done. All right, my spiritual babies. God bless, because it's all good.